Have you ever looked at the world and wondered if there's some kind of hidden connection between totally different disasters? I mean, we see it all the time, right? Ecosystems dying off, financial markets crashing, entire civilizations just falling apart. It all feels so random, so chaotic. But what if it isn't? What if all these things are secretly following the same script? Well, today we're going to dive into a really powerful new idea that suggests there is a universal code for how complex systems break down.
So let's just jump right into that question. On the surface, a coral reef bleaching in the ocean and a Wall Street bank going belly up seem like they're from different planets. One's biology, the other is economics. But what if they're actually two symptoms of the exact same underlying disease? It's a pretty bold claim, for sure. And it really makes you ask, what is this invisible thread that could possibly tie them together?
So the core idea here is that there's a universal pattern to failure. Once you strip away the unique details of each crisis, the fundamental way things collapse is surprisingly similar, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about a living cell or a global supply chain. It's almost like all of these systems speak the same hidden language of breakdown. And if we can learn to translate that language, we can start to really get why things fall apart. And maybe, just maybe, we can figure out how to build things that last. Okay, so if this universal pattern is real, why haven't we seen it before now? Well, the simple answer is that all the clues have been scattered. We study these failures like crazy, but all our knowledge is trapped in these separate little academic boxes. The problem is our knowledge is completely fragmented. You've got biologists over here talking about homeostasis, which is just a system's ability to keep itself stable. Then you have economists talking about market shocks. Ecologists are studying tipping points, and AI researchers are looking at how these independent, autonomous agents behave. See, every single field has its own jargon, its own language, which makes it nearly impossible for a biologist and an economist to share what they've learned. It's kind of like we have all the pieces to a really, really important puzzle, but they're all stored in different boxes with different labels on them. We can't see the big picture because nobody's been able to get all those pieces on the same table at the same time. Well, until now. And this brings us to the solution that's at the heart of the source material. A single, unifying framework that acts like a Rosetta Stone. Something that lets us translate between all these different scientific languages so we can finally see the connections. It's called the General Theory of Adaptation, or GTA for short. And you can think of it like a master key, one that's designed to unlock the shared rules for how all complex systems, whether they're living, social, or even artificial, respond to change, organize themselves, and, in the end, either survive or collapse. So, how does this thing actually work? Well, GTA breaks down the life of any system that can adapt into three basic layers, or stages. And if you can understand these three layers, you've got the key to decoding that universal pattern of failure. So these are the three core phases. First, adaptation, then emergence, and finally, persistence. Every complex system you can think of, from a single cell to an entire civilization, has to navigate these dynamics. Let's just quickly break down what each one means. All right. First up is adaptation. This is just the constant process of adjusting to change. And it's always driven by what the theory calls a misalignment. Basically, a mismatch or a gap between what a system needs and what its environment is giving it. Next, we've got emergence. Now, this is the really cool part. It's that almost magical moment when a bunch of simple adapting parts suddenly organize themselves into something bigger, a self-regulating whole that is way more than the sum of its parts. Think about individual brain cells firing to create a conscious thought, or a flock of birds moving like it has a single mind. That's emergence. And finally, there's persistence. So once a system becomes its own thing, once it's autonomous, this is the ongoing battle to just stay alive. It's this constant push and pull of maintaining stability and fighting off all the forces that want to make it break down and collapse. Okay, theory is great and all, but let's make this real. We can actually use this GTA toolkit to decode one of the most complex challenges we face today, the global climate crisis. From the GTA perspective, the climate crisis is a massive failure of adaptation. It's driven by what's called a collective cognitive misalignment. Now, that's a mouthful, but put simply, it just means there's a giant, dangerous gap between how our global systems work and the physical reality of our planet. And this failure is happening at every single level. At the micro level, our individual brains are just hardwired to deal with immediate threats, not a slow-moving crisis like this. Then, at the meso level, our institutions, our governments, our markets, they're all built for short-term wins, not long-term survival. And finally, at the macro level, the planet itself is just changing way faster than our global civilization can possibly handle. This all leads to a really critical concept called time-scale coupling. All it means is that for a system to survive, its response has to be at least as fast as the threat it's facing. And this is where the real problem kicks in. The climate threat is speeding up on a timescale of decades, right? But our ability to adapt, to change our politics, our economies, our cultures, that stuff unfolds over generations. So what's the result? A fundamental failure of timescale coupling. Our response is just way too slow for the problem we're facing. And according to GTA, this isn't just one little factor among many. No, this is the central #1 reason our collective response to the climate crisis keeps failing. So what's the big picture here? What does this all mean? Well, by zooming out like this, the general theory of adaptation gives us a completely new lens, a new way to look at all the complex problems we face every single day. The big takeaway really is this. GTA gives us a shared universal language. It's a diagnostic tool that lets us look at any complex system, our own health, our companies, our economies, and understand the deep down reasons why it might become fragile and eventually break. It helps us finally see the hidden patterns that were there all along. And that leaves us with one final and I think pretty crucial question. If there really is a universal code that explains how all systems collapse, does that mean there might also be a universal code for resilience, a code for persistence, a code for survival? And that's the challenge and the hope that this way of thinking really leaves us with.